Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari Radha Kunja Bihari Radhe. Jaya Nitai Gauranga Jaya Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Jaya Nitai Gauranga. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Nitai Gaura Haribol, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribol. Shri Radha Kunja Bihari Ki Jai, Shri Guru Nitai Ki Jai, Shri Kantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Govinda Ki Jai, Nanta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, Text number 25. Kutrasisa Sruti Sukha Magritra Sri Nirupa Quedam Kalaveram Asesa Rujam Virohaha Nevidyate Natu Jano Yad Apiti Vidvan Kamanalam Madulave Samayan Durape Kutrasi Saha Sruti Sukha Mrigatrishni Rupaha Quedam Kalavaram Asesha Rujam Viroha Navidyate Natu Jano Yat Apiti Vidvan Kamanalam Madulave Samayan Durape Kutra, where? Asisaha, benedictions. Shruti Sukhaha, simply pleasing to hear of. Mrigatrishni Rupaha, exactly like a mirage in the desert. Qua, where? Idam, this. Kalevaram, body. Asesa, unlimited. Rujam, of diseases. Viroha, the place for generating. Nividyate, become satiated. Na, not. To, but. Janaha, people in general. Yatapi, although. Iti, thus. Vidvan, so-called learned philosophers. Scientists and politicians. Kama analam, the blazing fire of lusty desires. Madhulave, with drops of honey. Happiness. Samayan, controlling. Durape, very difficult to obtain. Translation. In this material world, every living entity desires some future happiness, which is exactly like a mirage in the desert. Where is the water in the desert? Or in other words, where is happiness in this material world? As for this body, what is its value? It is merely a source of various diseases. The so-called philosophers, scientists, and politicians know this very well, but nonetheless, they aspire for temporary happiness. Happiness is very difficult to obtain, but because they are unable to control their senses, they run after the so-called happiness of the material world and never come to the right conclusion. Purport, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There is a song in the Bengali language which states, I constructed this home for happiness, but unfortunately there was a fire, and everything has now been burnt to ashes. This illustrates the nature of material happiness. Everyone knows it, but nonetheless one plans to hear or think something very pleasing. Unfortunately, all of one's plans are annihilated in due course of time. There were many politicians who planned empires, supremacy, and control of the world, but in due time, all their plans and empires, and even the politicians themselves, were vanquished. Everyone should take lessons from Prahlad Maharaj about how we are engaged in so-called temporary happiness through bodily exercises for sense gratification. All of us repeatedly make plans which are all repeatedly frustrated. Therefore, one should stop such plan making. As one cannot stop a blazing fire by constantly pouring ghee upon it, one cannot satisfy oneself by increasing plans for sense enjoyment. The blazing fire is Bhava Mahagni Davagni, the forest fire of material existence. This forest fire occurs automatically without endeavor. We want to be happy in the material world, but this will never be possible. We shall simply increase the blazing fire of desires. Our desires cannot be satisfied by illusory thoughts and plans. Rather, we have to follow the instructions of Lord Krishna. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam saranam vraja. Then we shall be happy. Otherwise, in the name of happiness, we shall continue to suffer miserable conditions. Om Ganatimanandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chaksho Unmiritam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Iti Namane. Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pachaline Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Desataline. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
हरे कृष्णा। तो आज हमारा परम सौभाग्य हमारे बीच में हिज ग्रेस नित्यानंद महाजन प्रभु है। प्रभु जी का जो जन्म है स्कॉटलैंड में हुआ और वहाँ 1996 में प्रभु जी कृष्ण के भक्ति में आए और उसके बाद उन्होंने वहाँ जो संकीर्तन पार्टी में 12 से 14 घंटा रोज संकीर्तन पार्टी में भाग लेते थे और फिर 2003 में उनको वृंदावन में उनके गुरु महाराज ने वहाँ भेजा, जहाँ कुसुम सरोवर एक मंदिर है इस्कॉन का भी, जो भरतपुर के राजा का पहले वो मंदिर था। तो ये मंदिर हम इस्कॉन को मिलने के बाद वहाँ प्रभु जी 2003 से वहाँ सेवा कर रहे हैं। हमको सबको मालूम है कि वृंदावन में रहना में इतना गर्मी, इतना ठंडी और इतना सारा जो वेदर का अब होता है। प्रभु जी ऑलराउंडर है, उसमें कुकिंग भी करते हैं, क्लीनिंग भी करेंगे, डेटी वर्शिप भी करेंगे, फोटोग्राफी करेंगे, लोगों को रिसेप्शन करेंगे, प्रचार करेंगे। बहुत थोड़े से भक्त वहाँ होते रहते हैं। तो उसके साथ प्रभु जी का जो बहुत डेडिकेशन है, बहुत प्रभु जी एकदम सिंपल है और प्रभु जी वहाँ एकदम 23 साल से वो कंटिन्यूसली वहाँ सेवा कर रहे हैं। तो हमारा परम सौभाग्य प्रभु जी आज आए, उनका 9:20 को ट्रेन है उनका आज, तो इसलिए फटाफट प्रभु जी क्लास देंगे और उनको ट्रेन भी पकड़ना है। तो उनका धन्यवाद देते एक बार जोर से हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र बोल के।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
हिज ग्रेस नित्यानंद महाजन प्रभु की जय।
Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, there were many politicians who planned empires, supremacy and control of the world, but in due time all their plans and empires, even the politicians themselves, were vanquished. So every individual soul in the material world are building our own little empires. Even the animals, the birds and the animals, you see them making their own little nests, or little dens where they can perform their sex life and sex gratification according to their modes of material nature. In India itself, there was the Mughal Empire, which rose and fell. And then there was the British Empire. From 1600, the East Indian Company began its business in India. And it rose and sustained itself. And then in 1857, there was rebellion against the British occupation. So a group of cavalry, horse-backed regiment, named the Second Queen's Bay Cavalry. They were sent to put down the rebellion near Lucknow. Afterwards, of course, in 1858, then India became part of the British Empire. It's curious because when people come to see me in Radha Bihari Temple, they say, how do you like India? So I remind them, this is not India, this is Braj. This is Sri Vrindavan Dham. This is not India. And never was it part of the British Empire. The same regiment of the Second Queen's Bay Cavalry, after putting down the rebellion, they were then assigned to Mathura. They were stationed in Mathura. But now these were peaceful times. So they were looking for their sense gratification. Now, men on horses, for their recreation, they go hunting. So in 1865, the regiment decided to go hunting as part of their seeking happiness, sense gratification. So one day, the pujaris at Kusum Sarovar at Govardhan, they witnessed this arrival of this regiment, this British regiment, and they made their camp on the Parikram path next to Kusum Sarovar. So the pujaris of Daoji temple, Shri Radhabon Bihari temple, the pujaris of the Hanuman temple, Nadakund, they came out to inquire from these British soldiers why they would come to Govardhan Hill. The head of this British soldiers was known as Colonel Henry Seymour. He was born in around about 1820s and he expired in 1891. So Colonel Henry Seymour, he replied that we're here to hunt the animals at Govardhan. So the pujaris, the Brahmins at Kusum Sarovar, peacefully left and they went to report this to the council at Govardhan and the council at Radhakund. So they returned some time later and they began to explain to Colonel Henry Seymour that this place is the most sacred place to the Hindus. So please don't hunt here. Govardhan Hill and this whole area, the animals here are actually sadhus. They're saints in the disguise of animals. Everyone here is a devotee of Lord Krishna. So Colonel Henry Seymour replied, we don't know anything of this knowledge. Of course, they were Christian. We're here to hunt the animals. We don't follow your Shastra. So the Brahmins were very clever. They had a plan because they were expecting that very response. The Brahmins requested Colonel Seymour, please, this side is Govardhan Hill, which is the most sacred. On this side of the Parikram path, on the eastern side, is outside the Parikram, outside of Govardhan territory. So please, if you're going to hunt animals, hunt on the east side of the Parikram path. So Colonel Henry Seymour was, okay, there's no problem. We can do that. There's animals here, this side, animals that side, so we will hunt on the eastern side. So the Brahmins were very happy. So the cavalry, the British soldiers, got on their horses. And of course, everywhere was jungle at that time. And there's no agriculture in those fields. They went into the east, left the Parikram path, which was just a narrow track in those days. In the 1800s, it was just a few sadhus and the local Brajvasis who would walk the Parikram. And it was, of course, very dangerous. So many wild animals were there. Tigers, wild boar, porcupine, deer, nilgai. So the regiment, on their horseback, they went into the eastern side of the Parikram path. And they were in there for some time. Now the villages around Govardhan, this news was spreading that the British were here and they were hunting the animals. So the crowds, as the day continued, more and more people assembled on the Parikram path from Kusum Sarovar towards Gwalpakra. This is the area where they were hunting. So the cavalry went into the jungle and there was no gunshots. It was very quiet. And after some time, the cavalry came out completely bewildered. There were no animals. Where had all the animals gone to? So they had a meeting, they were discussing. And the Brajvasis, who were continually assembling in more and more numbers, were talking and inquiring what's going on. Why they never shot any bullets. So in due course, the soldiers, Colonel Henry Seymour, they decided they would hunt on Govardhan Hill. So they informed the Brahmins, we have to hunt this side, there's no animals anywhere else. So the Brahmins were very clever, again they had a plan. Let us employ our people to shoo the animals away off of Govardhan Hill and onto the eastern side of the Parikram path. And that way your horses will not disturb Govardhan Hill himself. that place is most sacred to us. So Colonel Henry Seymour accepted. So the next hours, the local people with making loud noises, the drums and clapping and shouting, they went on to the western side of Govardhan Palikram, which will be around Udavkund side, and they started shooing the animals. And the British witnessed deer and porcupine, wild boars, nilgai, they were all running across the Palikram path from Govardhan Hill into the forest, the jungle on the eastern side. So now they were satisfied. The animals were there. Now they could seek their happiness. The British Empire could now hunt at Govardhan because they were the emperors of Govardhan Hill and Braj, or so they thought. So again, the soldiers, the Britishers, they entered the jungle on the left, on the eastern side. They went into the jungle, and again there was silence. There was no gunshots. And the local people were talking and what is happening? So after some time, again, the British came out on their horses and they began talking to each other. There was no animals there. The animals had all disappeared. They couldn't find any of the animals. So as they were discussing what to do next, they saw a large stag run from the Govardhan Hill over the Palikram path and they was trying to get into the jungle on the eastern side. It was maybe 500 meters, a few hundred meters away from them. Shri Radha Kunja Bihari ki jai, Shri Gonitai ki jai. So they saw that stag. And of course it was the first hunting animal they'd seen. So Colonel Henry Seymour raised his rifle and he shot it because the stag couldn't enter into the jungle because there was so many bushes and so many creepers. It couldn't find its track, couldn't find a way in. So it stopped on the edge of the path. And when it stopped there, Colonel Henry Seymour shot it and it hit the stag in the ankle. So the stag stumbled with a lot of blood from the ankle and it turned around and then it ran back into Govardhan Hill. So this would be in the area of around about Shamkutir, Gwalpokra. So then immediately the British went down to the place where they saw this stag enter the jungle around Govardhan Hill. But like I say, this was only occupied by the animals. So there was deer tracks and the monkey tracks and that kind of thing there. So the British couldn't access the jungle. But the blood was there. The blood marks were going across the road and into the jungle. So they knew they could easily track this stag. So again, they got local people to cut down the jungle, follow the track, cut down the creepers and everything else so they could get access. So after some time, they were following these trails of blood, and it came to a place, Gwalpokra, which is there today. And they came to there was a hollow in the ground, which had now been made into a Bhajan kutir. So half of it was underground and half of it was over the ground. And the blood went to the entrance. So then Colonel Seymour and his assistant entered that place. And they entered with their guns, expecting to confront this stag in such a small space. So when they entered, they looked in the darkness, there was no stag there. They kept looking. And they saw there was a sadhu, a devotee on the floor, sitting. And he looked up at them, startled. And so he cried, who are you? What's going on? So they said, we're British, we're here to hunt the animals. And we followed a stag to this place. We followed the trail of blood, and it's come here. So the Babaji smiled. He said, you can see there's no stag in here. How can there possibly be an animal like that in here? It's such a small Bhajan kutir. So they looked around, and Colonel Seymour realized, yes, how could it possibly be here? So he was very bewildered. But then he looked at the Babaji, and the Babaji was sat on the floor, and he was attending to a wound on his ankle. A very nasty wound. So he said, what happened? He said, oh, I got it caught on a thorn in the jungle. So Colonel Seymour was very curious, and he said, there's so much blood there. There's a bad wound. I will bring the doctor, the army doctor. So the Babaji said, no problem. I will just attend to it with the forest herbs and leaves. I will look after, no worry. So Colonel Seymour, of course, was very curious, was intrigued by this situation. So he went back to the camp, and the army doctor came, who was brought some time later, and he looked at the wound, and he said, this wound has been caused by a bullet. So the sadhu said, no, it's just a thorn. There was so much blood. So the doctor then went outside and looked for the thorns. He got the thorn from the thorn tree. And he said, how can a thorn like this cause such a bad wound? This has been caused by a bullet. So, of course, Colonel Henry Seymour, they knew there's only one bullet had been fired the whole morning. So then Colonel Seymour and the army, they went back to the Parikram path. They joined the rest of the regiment, and the hunt was cancelled. So then the Brahmins came, who had originally spoke to them, and they said, you've cancelled the hunt. Now you believe us. Now you believe our scripture, which explains that all the animals here are actually sadhus in disguise. So now you believe us, you make a rule. You make a rule that there will be no more hunting of animals in the whole of Sri Vrindavan Dham. So Colonel Henry Seymour made that law. He made the law that there was no hunting of animals allowed in the whole of Braj on either sides of the Jamuna. And that law was written in stone, a stone slab. It was written in English, in Hindi and Urdu. And that stone slab is there to this day at the entrance to Kusum Sarovar. So this is one example how the Braj, the British and nobody else, the Moguls, can take control of that which is spiritual, because it belongs to Lord Krishna. It's Krishna's home. And the other lesson we learn is how Giraj protects those devotees who takes his shelter. He protected the Brajvasis from Indra, and he protected the Brajvasis from the British Empire. So we can make our own empires. We can seek our own sense gratification, but it is all futile. What we're really seeking is the Krishna's empire. We're seeking Golok Vrindavan. We're seeking the happiness of realizing we're actually spirit souls, and the true empire is to be the dasana, dasana, das of Lord Sri Krishna. That happiness, we're saying we're looking for the mirage. That in this material world, every living entity desires some future happiness, which is exactly like a mirage in the desert. So in the Bhagavatam, it explains that mirage, that water we're looking for, is like the deer in the jungle. In the jungle, the deer is there and he's looking for water. Where is water? Because of the long grass, it cannot see that the lake, the pond, the water is right in front of him. But he's looking here and there, but he's not looking what is in locality. So it's like as human entities, the spirit souls, we have this body, and because we're on the bodily conception of life, we're looking for happiness through the bodily senses. Where is happiness? But the happiness is inside. The spirit soul is already happy. Because of this false ego, we get caught up in the material energy, and then we start building these false empires, these illusory empires. So this story was told by the Mataji, the Brajvasi Mataji, at the temple, she gave this temple to His Holiness Radhanath Swami's Konchalpati. And it was she spoke her memoirs in 2013. At that time she would speak a sentence, and it was translated into English by a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami. His name was Dr. Gauranga Sundar Prabhu, who serves as a doctor at the Bhaktivedanta Hospice in Vrindavan, an eye camp. So he translated this sentence by sentence to me, and we recorded it. And then he's serving at Vashana. So he went to Vashana, who was asking the Brajvasis there, have you heard of this story of how the British came and tried to hunt at Govardhan Hill? And they said yes, and they recited exactly the same story. So this is a story of the glories of Braj. It is not a material world. And Giraj to this day is still looking after and protecting his devotees. And of course, there's so many prayers. The most famous prayer is Raghunath Das Goswami, who prays to be a resident of Govardhan Hill, because Govardhan Hill can offer us this pure devotional service, and is also our protector. Like I say, when Indra was devastating the Brajvasis 5,000 years ago, Nanda Baba prayed to Nrsingadev, please protect us from this devastation. And in that protection, Giraj, the best of all devotees, he offered the service to Lord Nrsingadev by protecting the Brajvasis at that time. So Giraj is always our protector. So this is the story I wanted to share with you today, because it relates to this pastime, and it gives you a little bit of taste of Govardhan Hill and the glories of Braj and all the living entities that are there in whatever form they take. Shishirada Kunja Bihari ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
We want. Prabhu, you are so long, you are in Govardhan. The situation like so hot, so cold, and very less devotees. So how you have got so much inspiration to stay there? Because I think about this and I think I can't do this as you are doing. So it's really good and very inspiration for us to see you there serving just so many years after years. So you can share some of your relation, Prabhuji.
You see, with the instruction from the spiritual master comes the ability. So I was instructed to go there by my spiritual master to serve there. He just said, Nityanand, I'm sending you to Krishna Sriva. And I said, yes, Guru Maharaj. So we have to have faith in the spiritual master. Of course, the spiritual master is not going to deliver an instruction unless he knows the disciple has the ability. So it's simply for the disciple to have faith in the instructions of the spiritual master. So we need the faith of Prahlad Maharaj, the implicit faith. Prahlad Maharaj took shelter of the holy names. When everything was, his father, parents, the whole empire of Hiranyakasipu was upon him, trying to kill him, destroy him. So this is the faith we need. So Prahlad Maharaj is inspiring us with faith in these verses, to have faith in the instructions of a Guru, Shadow and Shastra. And in this pastime I've told you, you see that even the British, in the end, they submitted to the Vedic Shastra. They accepted because they saw. They didn't change their hearts in long term, but at that moment, they were irrefutably defeated. So we need faith and not be irrefutably defeated by our own senses and mind. Remember, the worst enemy is our mind. So the mind and our senses are like the empire we're battling against. And we are spirit soul. We don't belong to this empire. We belong to the eternal empire. So we have to protect who we are and what we are by chanting the holy names, chanting 16 rounds, following regulative principles, and associating with devotees. And then we'll always remain under the shelter of Lord Nrsingadev, Giraj, and our parampara. I won't say Shri Radha Kunja Bihari because we want to let them have their pastimes without us bothering them with our insignificant problems. But Nrsingadev is there, and our Acharya's prayers are there, and Prahlad Maharaj's prayers, and the whole Bhagavatam, to pull us out of this material empire and remind us where we truly belong. So faith. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for that story, Prabhuji. Amazing story it is. My question is about Prabhupada is writing so many times that about plan making. Don't make plans. He's saying that they will always be frustrated. Therefore, one should stop plan making. So, sadhaka like someone who is in, so as a duty he has to do some planning. Like here Prabhupada is saying, I constructed this home for happiness, but but as a duty, someone has to have a house, and then, but he is trying to practice devotional service. So does that he should make those plans or desires, or how do we?
So when we make plans, like we're making plans in our project, Kusum Sarva Radhabana Bihari Temple is a project under ISKCON Chaupati. So if there's any, we have our own council, our own devotees are there. But then if there's anything significant, we go to our councillor, which is Nityanand Prabhu. He's the leader of the project. And then if there's anything significant, he goes to the ISKCON Chaupati Leadership Council. This is happening. What should we do? And if they're necessary, they consult Radhanath Swami. What do we do? You see? So likewise, whatever plans we're making, we make. But ultimately, we go through our authorities in this material world. But ultimately, it's Krishna is the boss. And he might decide, like, that's not the plan I want to go this way. So we make our plans, and things don't go according to plan. We think, well, maybe Krishna's got an alternative plan. You see? So we always remember that Krishna is the ultimate, we're ultimately serving him for his pleasure. And he will make the plans accordingly, ultimately. And so when a devotee sees a change in plan, or his plan doesn't go according to plan, one has to, of course, the devotee in all humility will look into himself and maybe consider his own fault. What problem did one make? But the consideration is always there that, yeah, we have the saying in England, man plans and God cans man's plans. God cans man's plans. Means he cans it. No, we're not doing that. So you can see the planning you're making, like the temple, the temple at Mayapur, the planetarium. They've made so many plans. They made the temple plan and then something else. They couldn't make that temple because the location and all this. So many problems. That's changing. But they keep going ahead with the plan. Prabhupada wants the temple. He wants the temple, planetarium temple. We're going to make it. But it takes time because these plans come in. Land plans, all these, there's so many problems. So, but they keep pursuing the same, what they want. Prabhupada wants this, so we're going to fulfill the desire. So what we have eventually at Mayapur will be according to what Lord Chaitanya wants, Panchatattva wants. So we make our plans, but the ultimate leader of the plan is Lord Krishna. And then he can make these tweaks. So it's not our plan doesn't work out. It's that Krishna's got his own plan. He's guiding us. And also he's looking for us to surrender. He's looking for our surrender. So Krishna wants us to spread the Sankirtan movement, but he's also looking to purify each and every one of us, bring us closer to him. So we're under the close care. So he's protecting us and at the same time helping us to preach what is best for preaching. Is that okay? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Let us thank Nityanand Mahajan Prabhu for sharing his realization on Govardhan, how all the devotees and all the animals, they are also saints, and giving such an amazing insight about this and increasing our faith on Govardhan. So we also seek his association again in the future. So of course, thank you for it. So let us chant one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. His Grace Nityananda Mahajan Prabhu ki jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.